What if I told you that a single move from Canada could bring the world's most powerful tech company to its knees? No, this isn't a movie plot, this is happening right now. Brace yourself, because the stakes are higher than you think. For decades, the U.S. has dominated the global stage, making the rules of trade and economics. But what happens when one country finally says, enough is enough? In an unexpected move, Canada has shaken the foundations of global trade, sending shockwaves all the way to Silicon Valley. This video will dive into how a simple toll on U.S. trucks passing through British Columbia set off a chain reaction, one that's cost the U.S. tech industry hundreds of billions. Stick around to find out why Donald Trump never saw this coming, and how it could change everything we know about international trade. For decades, Canada has played the role of the quiet and diplomatic neighbor, respecting trade agreements and maintaining good relations with its southern neighbor, the United States. But the patience of this neighbor ran out when Donald Trump escalated the trade war, slapping tariffs on Canadian goods and threatening its industries. It wasn't just about trade, it was about sovereignty. Many Canadians felt that Trump was trying to erode their country's independence, and this wasn't something they were willing to let slide. Then British Columbia made a bold move under the leadership of Premier David Eby, signaling to the world that Canada wasn't just going to sit back and take these hits anymore. He delivered a speech that would go down in history. Eby didn't just announce tolls on U.S. freight trucks passing through British Columbia. He declared defiance. He said, "We are doing all we can to detach from the U.S., to move to other markets, and to break free from the whims of one person in the White House." It was more than just symbolic. Eby's move was calculated. It was a direct response to the tariffs imposed by Trump's administration on Canadian goods like aluminum and steel, industries that were vital to Canada's economy. The U.S. claimed these tariffs were in place to protect American jobs, but to Ottawa, they felt like an economic chokehold designed to make Canada dependent on American manufacturing. The U.S. wasn't the only target. British Columbia wasn't merely defending trade. It was setting the stage for a complete overhaul of Canada's economic strategy. David Eby's first step was strategic tolls on U.S. freight trucks. These trucks used British Columbia as a transit corridor to Alaska, saving time and money. By imposing fees on these shipments, Eby wasn't just raising revenue, he was applying pressure on the U.S. to show that Canada wasn't afraid to retaliate. This toll wasn't just about money, it was about sending a message. If the U.S. wants to play hardball, Canada can do the same. At the same time, British Columbia was putting in motion a much bigger plan, an economic resilience strategy aimed at reducing reliance on U.S. trade. The government introduced incentives for Canadian businesses to prioritize interprovincial trade instead of relying on American imports and exports. This wasn't just a temporary retaliation, it was a long-term structural shift to shield Canada from the unpredictability of American tariffs. But there was more to it. British Columbia also began to implement low-carbon fuel mandates that would require domestic sourcing of fuel, cutting out American suppliers almost entirely. This policy wasn't just about creating a sustainable future for Canada, it was a move to regain control over its economic destiny. And as these changes were taking place, the world was beginning to pay attention. While Canada was fortifying its economy, something much bigger was unfolding, a chain reaction triggered by uncertainty. Investors hate uncertainty, and Trump's trade war created plenty of it. His unpredictability one day imposing tariffs, the next threatening sanctions was throwing the financial world into chaos. But one sector was feeling the heat more than others: technology. For years, Silicon Valley thrived on a delicate balance of global supply chains. Companies like NVIDIA relied on international cooperation, sourcing materials from countries like China and Canada. But Trump's push for economic nationalism was threatening that system. In particular, NVIDIA, the world's biggest AI chipmaker, was about to lose more than just market share, it was about to lose $1 trillion. NVIDIA's downfall was set into motion by Trump's chip export restrictions aimed at slowing down China's AI development. With the stroke of a pen, the U.S. tightened the screws on China's access to advanced AI semiconductors, blocking companies like NVIDIA from selling their most powerful chips to Beijing. The goal was simple: stop China's AI progress. But the result was far from what the Trump administration expected. Instead of crippling China, the sanctions backfired, causing massive uncertainty in the tech sector. Investors began to panic as the U.S. was inadvertently cutting off not just China, but its own tech companies' access to critical markets and materials. The fear was real. If the U.S. was willing to cut off chip sales to China, what would stop China from cutting off the raw materials needed for these chips? NVIDIA was in trouble. The company, once valued at a staggering $3.66 trillion, began to plummet. On January 27th, NVIDIA lost $589 billion in a single day, a loss that shocked the entire tech world. But that wasn't the end. Over the next 2 months, NVIDIA's market value continued to slide, dropping by $1 trillion. As NVIDIA's stock tanked, it wasn't just a tech sector issue, it was a full-blown economic crisis. What started with a small retaliation over truck tolls in British Columbia had spiraled into a global market correction. Wall Street had seen market corrections before, but nothing on this scale. The irony here was striking. Trump's trade war wasn't supposed to hurt American companies, it was supposed to protect them. But now, the crown jewel of America's tech industry, the company leading the AI revolution, was on its knees. So, how did this small act of defiance by British Columbia connect to NVIDIA's downfall? The answer lies in globalization. NVIDIA had relied on a complex, interconnected supply chain. Taiwan's TSMC manufactured the most advanced AI chips. China provided critical raw materials, and Canada supplied vital components like nickel and aluminum for cooling systems. But as Canada retaliated, it sent a warning sign to the world. America's closest allies weren't standing by anymore, they were fighting back. As British Columbia imposed tolls, it became clear that other countries weren't going to sit idly by. China, in particular, made its move. China unveiled its own AI chip, D, one that didn't rely on NVIDIA's most advanced processors. This wasn't just about China building its own tech, it was a direct challenge to U.S. trade restrictions. Soon after, reports emerged that Chinese tech firms had found workarounds to obtain NVIDIA chips despite the U.S. sanctions. This development was a shock to investors. If China didn't need NVIDIA, what was stopping the rest of the world from moving on? The panic was real. Hedge funds dumped NVIDIA stock, fearing that the AI revolution was no longer an American monopoly. The story of how Canada's tolls on U.S. trucks set off a domino effect, leading to NVIDIA's downfall highlights a bigger shift in the global economy. America's global dominance was no longer guaranteed. As countries like China and Canada took steps to reduce reliance on the U.S., global economic power was shifting. This has real-world implications for everyday life. Technology prices could rise as supply chains become more fragmented. Manufacturers could seek alternative sources for chips, causing delays and raising costs for smartphones, computers, and cars. At the same time, Canada's economic independence plan could pave the way for more local production of goods, creating jobs within Canada, but also disrupting American supply chains. For consumers, it means higher prices and possibly longer wait times for products that rely on U.S. imports. The question remains, will Trump back down from his trade war? Will the U.S. shift its policies to regain the trust of its allies and protect its industries? Only time will tell. However, one thing is clear: Canada's response to the U.S. trade war is part of a larger shift in the global economic order. Countries are less willing to be pushed around by America, and this has wide-reaching consequences for the tech industry, global trade, and everyday consumers. In the end, the fallout from a toll on U.S. trucks in British Columbia led to a recalibration of the global supply chain, challenging America's economic dominance. What started as a regional issue has now become a global one, and investors are waking up to the reality that the U.S. might not be the dominant economic force it once was. Do you think this shift in power is a positive one for the global economy? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay updated on this unfolding story, contributing to longer vehicle ownership times. In fact, the average age of a car on U.S. roads is now over 12 years old. One of the most immediate and visible impacts of U.S. tariffs on the automotive industry is job losses. As production costs rise, many automakers have had to make difficult decisions, including laying off workers. In 2024, GM announced that it would cut about 1,200 jobs due to rising steel and aluminum prices caused by tariffs. While these layoffs are spread across various departments, the hardest hit are workers in production plants and Tier 1 suppliers who rely on cheaper materials imported from overseas. The problem extends beyond just the automakers themselves. Tier 1 suppliers, those that provide essential parts and materials like batteries, transmission systems, and electronic components, are also facing layoffs. According to research by the Center for Automotive Research, the auto tariffs could cost the U.S. up to 700,000 jobs by 2025. This includes jobs not only in vehicle production, but also in logistics, retail, and parts manufacturing. While the intention behind tariffs was to protect American workers and industries, the unintended consequence has been widespread job displacement. Many workers, particularly those in manufacturing towns, are now facing long-term unemployment or being forced to accept lower-paying jobs in other sectors. For workers in the automotive sector, especially those in manufacturing, the threat of job loss is becoming a harsh reality. For instance, workers who were previously making a middle-class income in assembly plants are now being pushed into lower-wage sectors or have to relocate to other regions in search of employment. Additionally, communities that have long relied on automotive plants for economic stability are seeing increased unemployment rates, driving up social welfare costs and putting pressure on local economies. The primary aim of the tariffs was to encourage U.S. manufacturers to bring jobs and production back to American soil. In some cases, this has been achieved, with several major automakers committing to increased domestic production. In 2024, Ford and GM both announced plans to build new plants and expand existing ones in the U.S., a move that the government applauded as a success of the tariff strategy. However, this shift has come at a high cost. The increased prices for critical materials mean that manufacturers are forced to absorb a portion of these costs, which directly impacts the price of vehicles. The final sticker price of a car has become a key battleground in the auto industry. In fact, a survey by Santander U.S. revealed that over 52% of middle-income households delayed purchasing a vehicle in the past year because of costs. The rise of electric vehicles, EVs, has been the most significant shift in the automotive industry in recent years. EV manufacturers, including Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid Motors, are all competing to dominate the market. However, tariffs on Chinese-made components, including batteries and electric motors, are complicating their efforts. In 2024, the U.S. imposed tariffs of up to 100% on electric vehicle parts sourced from China. This has driven up the cost of EVs, which are already priced higher than their gasoline counterparts. While these vehicles are more environmentally friendly, the high cost makes them out of reach for many American consumers, especially when coupled with the unpredictability of government subsidies and incentives. On the global stage, the U.S. automotive sector is falling behind as countries like China and Germany double down on electric mobility. As of 2024, China is leading the global electric vehicle market with a 65% share, while the U.S. holds only 7%. If tariffs continue to stifle the domestic EV market, the U.S. risks losing its competitive edge in the global automotive race. As we look toward the future, it's clear that the impact of tariffs on the U.S. auto industry is multifaceted. While they have had some success in bringing jobs back to the U.S., the economic consequences have been far-reaching. Higher vehicle prices, job displacement, and a slower transition to electric vehicles are just a few of the impacts felt by consumers and workers alike. For everyday buyers, this means that affording a new car, whether it's gasoline-powered or electric, may be even more difficult in the coming years. The increased cost of materials and tariff-induced inflation is pushing the price of vehicles to new heights, making it harder for families to afford new cars and delaying purchases in the process. For automakers, the path forward will require a careful balance of innovation and global competitiveness in a changing economic landscape. As we move forward, the key question remains: will U.S. tariffs continue to protect domestic manufacturing and workers, Or will they end up pushing consumers toward cheaper imports and stifling the growth of the industry? If you're in the market for a car or planning to switch to electric, make sure to factor in the higher prices and uncertainty in the future of automotive tariffs.